Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Pie Records, and I'm here with Lee McDade from Atomic Drag. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good, good. Um, so Atomic Drag, I see you've been pretty busy this year. You have an EP and a single.
hmm
Um, Tell me when the band started and kind of what your idea was when you got into it.
Well, I would have started recording the first EP about March this year. All kind of happened by accident. Really, I was working on something else and I wasn't really feeling it, and I was just messing about in guitar and come out with the third song in the EP was the first one I wrote. Uh, just kind of fired my imagination, kind of more than what I had been doing, and I just went with it. And over I don't get an awful lot of time to record, so I was just doing it in bits and pieces. And then by end of June, it was kind of ready to go. I felt, and I put that out, and did really quite well. I had absolutely no expectations for it whatsoever. Um, so I mean, the response to it was quite shocking, to be honest with you.
So, did you just have physical media, or did you have a good response on Spotify and the streaming platforms?
I have to say, I kind of took off in Bandcamp a bit first before I even thought about putting it on Spotify. Um, my Spotify stats, although not crazy numbers of like a way more than I thought they ever would be. Especially I put out a single there for Halloween, and it got crazy plays. I mean, that blew me away. It's the only song that's kind of went over 1,000 plays in Spotify so far, and I wasn't expecting any of the response I've gotten to any of it so far at all.
And did you put the music out yourself?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, so it seems to me there's a surf punk psychedelic kind of
hmm
garage rock influence. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. That kind of covers all bases of kind of what I was going for when I started it. I kind of my whole background in music really is like coming from the early 90s when I would have been about 14, 15, and getting into Pixies and Sonic Youth. Um, the Cure, my favorite band on the planet. And that's kind of where my music taste is kind of informed from. And I think my first kind of running with the idea of surf rock really would have been Pixies. The first Pixies album I got was Bossa Nova, which kicks off with Cecilia Ann, which I did a
Yeah.
cover of in the first EP, and like, so that was really my introduction to kind of surf rock as an idea. Obviously it's been around for years, and growing up, you probably would have been aware of it, like, but that's the first kind of when it really came to the forefront of my mind as a separate kind of genre, I suppose. And going on from that, Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet were a huge influence. To get into them, probably how most people get into them, through watching the Kids in the Hall
Yeah.
sketch show. So I mean that's really, and it was always in the back of my mind. It was something I wanted to try and do. And I was just sitting down messing about with the guitar, and it came out completely by accident. And I thought, this is as good a time as any, I suppose, to chase after the idea. It's been in the back of my head for a while.
Awesome. Did you get to play any gigs yet in Ireland?
Well, it's just me. It's a one-man show so far. And things have only really opened up gig-wise again, but I haven't really put any thought into the idea of gigging at the minute. I'm quite happy sitting here in my back room with my guitars, recording, just experimenting with stuff, really. Um, Most of my gigging days were like kind of from the mid-90s to the early 2000s. And as much as I miss playing live, I don't miss carrying heavy amplifiers all over the place and up flights of stairs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a double-edged sword, I suppose. It's a nice idea, but if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world for me. just enjoying writing, recording, putting the music out there at the minute.
Awesome. So the Dracula theme that you went for Halloween,
Mhm.
what made you go with Dracula in particular?
I am not 100% sure. I just kind of, it was one of those ones where I come up kind of with the first riff on it, and then the rest of the song kind of just suggested itself. I just go where it leads me. And by the time I'd kind of finished it and did the intro section, then that kind of, it was suggesting to me kind of a Dracula type feel, the kind of opening scenes of the uh, the movie, and shots of the dark castle and the rain and the wind, and it just seemed to suggest itself to me. I just kind of follow the lead of where the writing takes me, I suppose.
Yeah. I heard some voiceover work in some of the songs. You want to
Uh-huh.
talk about how they inspired the song, or what those voiceovers meant to you?
Um, to an extent, I suppose doing instrumental music of this kind of nature, and I wouldn't say, well, probably most of the stuff in the first EP probably had that kind of horror kind of feel to it. So you kind of want to try and kind of push that vibe a bit further, and adding the vocal samples helps do that. As far as, I mean, figuring out which ones you put into it, it's just a matter of sitting down, chopping them up, putting them in, see where they fit, see where they don't fit, bit of trial and error, I suppose, but it's all about adding to the feel of the track, trying to get the whole vibe over.
So I'm under the impression that you have other music projects going on. Is that true?
To an extent, I've kind of put them all on the back burner at the minute when Atomic Drag kind of took off, because the stuff I was doing, as far as recording goes, like I do it myself here at home, and that is still, I've been doing it for about the past 10 years, but just on and off. I've never really dedicated too much time to learning it properly. And at the start of this year, I decided I was going to put a bit more time into it. But the music I had been working on, I think to an extent I wasn't doing it any justice, because I didn't know my way around the software, and I wasn't really firing my imagination to continue with it. So I thought, instead of running that stuff into the ground, I would just do whatever come into my head, just as a way to have something there in front of me to work with, where I could learn how to use the software and record properly. And as I say, it's a complete accident that I came out with that song when I did, because I say that just, I thought it was quite goofy and funny sounding. I sent it to a few of my friends who said, this is great. So I kind of just went further with it, and it's still going. I've got the new EP is recorded. I'm just mixing it at the minute. Hopefully to be out early next year. And it's just about enjoying the process. At the start of the year, the other stuff I was working on, I wasn't enjoying the process of working on it. And instead of banging my head off a brick wall and getting sick with it and jacking the whole thing in, I just did something different, which then I did find was enjoying. It was fun, and it was firing me up to keep going.
Cool. So the new EP you're working on, is it expanding on the original idea of where you started?
I think to an extent there is a bit of a wider range with it. It's not so horror based, I don't think. At the minute, there's maybe one or two tracks of that kind of feel. I think as far as the whole surf rock thing goes, and especially as far as the horror surf thing goes, there's so many bands out there doing it way better than I do. Ginky Ginky Panic and Creature Preachers, and all these bands, they're amazing. Night Chill as well, or another great band from Canada. And I think for me personally, there's only so far that I can take the horror surf thing, and I need to start expanding out in different directions with it to kind of keep my interest in it fresh as well. And I think that's happening in the new EP, and I think it'll continue. I think there's still quite a wide scope within the surf rock genre to go in many different directions and not get hemmed into one particular thing, like, for me, the horror thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question about EPs. A lot of surf bands put out EPs as opposed to albums. What is your take on that? Is it just getting the music out there when you finish it? You want to strike while the iron's hot, or do you think short bursts are a better way to go?
Well, there's many different ways you can answer that. For me personally speaking, the thing now seems to be is bands releasing single songs, online, Spotify and Bandcamp. And for me, coming from late 80s, early 90s, it's albums were the thing, but it was also a great time for EPs. You had all those My Bloody Valentine EPs and the Reader's Safari EP. These were all big things, from that shoegaze kind of era too. Like the EP was a big thing. Another part of it these days, I think, is people's attention span is getting shorter. But also, I think for me, because I've only limited time to sit down and write and record, I've got my family to look after, and so as far as putting a single out like I did at Halloween is, for me personally speaking, like a stopgap type thing between longer releases. And I think, I always lie towards the longer releases, but if I was to put my mind into doing an album, I think it would take far too long. There'd be too much of a gap between releases. I had wanted to get the next EP out round about Halloween time, and I say time just wasn't working out for me, which is why I did the single instead. But so many different things really. For me, a single isn't enough. It needs to be longer. Doing albums, I think, is going to take me way too long to put out. So an EP falls nicely in between that for me.
Yeah, definitely. Plus, maybe the themes would translate better in a shorter format. Would you think that?
I definitely agree with that there, because not to use, I know the word concept kind of tends to get, so from the 70s prog era, people kind of tend to look down on it. But I like the idea of a concept that kind of holds everything together, within the frame of an album or an EP. That works for me. The first EP, I suppose, essentially was kind of like a horror thing, and the cover of Cecilia Ann was just like a nod to my influences within the whole thing, but that's not to say that there isn't as such an overarching theme to the next EP. I think I've started writing. What I did with the first EP was I wrote, recorded and mixed each song before I moved on to the next one, because part of my problem through the years has been great at starting things and terrible at finishing them. So I made a point of, I'm not allowed to start a new song until I finish one. With the new EP, what I did was write and record everything first with the intention of mixing it all afterwards, which I think was maybe a bad idea because it's taking me longer now. And you need those kind of breaks between like sitting staring at a computer screen and mixing and wearing your ears out, and the real kick in recording stuff is like in the writing it. That's where the real excitement that comes, when you get a good idea going and you're rolling with it and you can hear in your head where it's going and what you need to do next, what change needs to come. That's the exciting part for me. but I'm getting away from the question you asked here about concepts and that. But yeah, no, I think that definitely, even if I don't follow a concept entirely through, it's always a good starting point. You know, already I think for the whatever comes after this, I have a vague idea in my head of the type of feel I want to capture for it. And that, I say, I was sitting the other night and kind of thinking about it, and it came into my head, and butterflies in the stomach, getting excited about it.
Yeah.
But even it doesn't follow through. It's that initial kick of the idea, and the excitement to get you fired up and going. That's where it lies for me, I think.
It's it must be pretty much of a freedom type thing for you, where you can sit and hear an idea come into your head and go lay like a scratch track down. And so it must be very freeing for you. What's that like?
It's great. I mean, I'm not beholden to anyone. This is not a career. It's essentially a hobby. So, I can do whatever I want, essentially. I did not expect, as I say, when I put the first EP out, for people to take any notice of it, and at the same time, that very slight bit of attention that I got from it is still not going to influence what I come out with next. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, because again, that's where part of the whole kick lies in, the getting that initial spark of an idea and following it through, just to please yourself. I hadn't heard the first EP for quite a few months there, and because when you're sitting, you write it, you record it, and then you spend time mixing it, you've heard it so much that you're not really hearing it anymore.
Yeah.
I sat down a couple of weeks ago there and listened to it for the first time in months, and I was quite happy. There's not much I would change about it. I think as far as my skills go with mixing and that, there, it's they're at a certain level and you're always learning. But I mean, for what I knew or know at this particular time, I was quite happy with it when I listened back to it again. And it was for me, for my own entertainment, and the fact that other people like it is obviously, you get a real kick out of that there. But again, it's all about it being fun, and if it gets to the point where I feel like I'm trying to please people and it's not fun anymore, then it's time to do something different. But I'm still enjoying myself.
Awesome. You bring up a good point about mixing the songs and how long it takes, and you hear it over and over. You kind of get burned out over the process. A lot of people don't realize that you go in, you write, you record, but the mixing takes the most time. You want to talk about your experience with the mixing?
It's something that I've kind of been recording my own stuff from about, I'd say, 1999. I got my first 4-track recorder. It's sitting down here beside me, actually. We Tascam one, but there's not much mixing involved there. You've only got 4 tracks to work with, and but that's what kind of got me started recording. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm overly interested in recording as such. It's just a means to an end to getting an idea out of your head and down onto you can hear it back. So for about the first 10 years, I was using digital recording. I was basically using it as a glorified 4-track. I wasn't using it to its full capacity, and I think I kind of got a bit sick of not knowing what I was doing. I was really just sitting down and just kind of doing this, that, and the other, and hoping for the best. And I say at the start of the year, I decided to take it a bit more seriously and actually sit down and read up about, and I'm not talking about anything overly complicated here. I'm just talking about the bare minimum basics of getting a half decent recording together and mixing it. And I just followed a few tutorials, really. And what they always say in these things, if it sounds good to you, then then you're doing something right, and that's what it's all about. And it's sometimes about being able to trust your own ears or trust your own instincts. And when you get to the mixing stage and you're hearing the same thing over and over again, you kind of start to doubt your own ears. It's always handy. I have a good friend of mine who puts
Yeah.
out his own recordings as well, that I would send stuff to him and he would, give me some feedback, and he does the same. He sends his stuff to me. And it's always good to have somebody to bounce off, which is obviously the downside of not being in a band. I've, been in bands since I was like 18 years old. And it's that, always like being able to bounce ideas off other people in the room is great when you're sat down on your own, and if something's not going well and you're constantly second guessing yourself, it can be hard to push forward. But I've always found that your first instinct is usually the right one, but I say, as far as the mixing thing goes, it's just the more you do it, the better you get at it, I think. And that's all I've been doing, is trying to do it as much as I can, but not to the point where I burn myself out on it.
Yeah. I see you have a Fender behind you, but I can't.
Actually a Squire.
Okay, I can't read what kind of guitar it is.
It's a Jag.
Oh, look at that!
Lovely,
beautiful,
nice guitar. But I would love an actual real Fender at some stage. But I mean, those Squire guitars are amazing for the price. They really are. I've got another one as well. This is the Bullet Mustang. Those are only like about 120 quid over here in the UK.
Oh wow!
They're great value for money as well. They're great for modding. People buy them just to do them up, But I'm a total gearhead. I love my pedals, my guitars,
What do you what sort of pedals do you like to use? I know there's a very ambient sound to your music. What are you using that you kind of favor?
There's a lot of stuff that I use. I tend to use Guitar Rig when I'm recording, but I also would run various pedals into my interface as well. The very first song I ever wrote, Atomic Undead, was a combination of these two pedals. Those are handmade by a guy in Belfast.
Oh.
And that's like a fuzz face, but a bit more extreme. And that is like an octave, but it's more based on the Ampeg Scrambler, which is like a ring modulator type pedal, which kind of gives it a kind of odd, kind of unpredictable kind of edge to it. But I was messing about with those when I came out with the first song, and that's what I says to Graham that makes these pedals. I think if it wasn't for those, Atomic Drag might not even ever have happened, So that's what I keep saying to him. This one here, he'd only just started. Well, he'd been building pedals for years, but at the start of first lockdown, he decided to give some pedals away to musicians in lockdown, just to lift people's spirits a bit, And this might have been the first one I gave away, because my wife knows his wife and says to him, I would love one, so this is what he sent out. And then shortly after that, I think it was for Father's Day, Sarah had this one commissioned, the fuzz face one. And I use that quite a lot. It's all over the new EP as well. As far as a lot of anything with delay and reverb is generally handled within Guitar Rig or any other separate plugins. I say I don't really have to worry about playing live, so I can really there's nothing too extreme at the minute effects wise, but I can allow myself to get carried away if needs be, because I don't need to worry about recreating it live at the minute.
Yeah. The delay that you use, do you play that while you're recording, because that'll kind of give you a different feel of how you're strumming and things like that, or do you add it during the mix?
Generally I will set up as close to the sound I'm looking for as possible when I'm recording, and then I can tweak it afterwards. I think that's where I used to go wrong before, was trying to get everything to sound perfect before I recorded what I was trying to record. And then you would get disheartened because you spent so long trying to find a good sound that, then you've lost all interest in recording. And now I will get, as I say, unless there's a particular sound I want with the fuzz, you know, where it's going straight into the interface, so that there's on the track that can't be removed once it's recorded, you know, so something like that there I need to be sure about beforehand. But otherwise I get as close as possible, just so I can get the stuff down, and then I worry about, you know, tweaking everything in the mixing stage.
Okay. Okay. I'm interested in the strings that people use. Some people use a heavier gauge for for surf music. They use the flat wound strings. What is your preference?
Well, my friend that I use to for feedback when I send stuff to him, he swears by flat wounds. I've not actually tried them yet for years, and I figured this out recently. I would use 10 to 46 gauge strings because in 1991, in a guitar magazine, there was an interview with the Pixies, who were like, and still are, one of my favorite bands. And they were saying, you know, they use 10 to 46 strings, and ever since then, that's what I used as well. But recently, especially because the Jag is short scale, so the normal gauge strings I would use would feel a bit looser. So what I did was got a hybrid set where the bottom three strings here are the gauge I would normally use. The bottom three are heavier gauge than what I would normally use, and I find it works a lot better in this particular guitar because it's a short scale. But yeah, that's only, I'd say, halfway through this year, and I think it's made all the difference to the feel of the guitar. So it has. But I say for years, because the Pixies use 10 to 46, I use 10 to 46. So that's how easily influenced, and like how I suppose your tastes in that are formed at such an early age as well, I think.
Yeah. So when you split the gauges up on your guitar, the other gauge that you were talking about that you would normally use, is that the nines?
No, tens. Nines I've always found to not enough tension on them, really. And I always found, whenever I very first started playing guitar about 1990, when I was using nines, I would always break the high E constantly. And I was always asking my mum for money to go and buy a high E string at the music shop, you know. I found once I jumped up to use tens, that happened a lot less frequently. But that particular set is, I don't know, I'm kicking about somewhere, is Ernie Balls. You know, you don't have to buy two sets and split them up. That's, if you can see that there, that's so you have your proper gauges in there that I was using, which are 10 to 48. So the last three strings are all up to in their gauge size. So that's what I use, and I feel it's made all the difference at the minute.
Well, what is, when you say it's made all the difference, what is it for the sound? Is it more for the sound or more for the feel of how you're playing it?
I don't think there's essentially much of a change in the sound, but definitely how it feels, you know, especially with a short scale guitar, you know, so there's not as much length between the nut and the bridge. So say the 10 to 46s would feel a bit looser, whereas there's a bit more tension on your bottom three strings with the heavier gauge. So when you're doing, you know, like some of those techniques you would use in surf guitar where you're double picking, you know, you're able to do it a bit more precisely because the string's not flopping and you're not catching the pick every now and then. And, you know, it's not that I'm a very precise player or even a very good guitar player. Since I stopped playing in bands, I've noticed my playing has just went downhill, you know, like from playing all the time to now just picking up the guitar every now and then. But yeah, just as I say, for me, it's more the tension of the string, you know.
Does that affect the action on your guitar? Is it more comfortable?
I would assume now, whenever I had a guy locally set it up for me, and I gave him the heavy set of strings to do it with, so he set it up specifically for, this is like just whenever I bought this guitar last year, the year before. And the minute it arrived, I sent it out to him to set it up for me with the heavier strings. And when they come back, now that was 11s, so they were heavy all across the board. And I felt it was too much, so I went back to 10 to 46. And after a few months of that, again, I felt, well, actually, it was about a year when I started doing the surf stuff and was trying to, doing the double picking that I was talking about. It just, they felt too floppy. I wasn't accurate enough with the picking. Felt they needed more tension. So, and it hadn't even occurred to me to look and see if there was hybrid sets, of two different sets of string gauges mixed. That was like a light bulb moment. But yeah, no, it's all about the tension in those bottom three strings, because like if you hit it hard and you have a lighter gauge, your string does that thing where it vibrates slightly out of tune and then comes back into tune again. And that's I can't think of the word to describe the particular sound I'm thinking of, but it's always something I want to avoid.
Okay. So before we sign off, I want people to know where they can hear your music, where they can contact you and find out a little bit more information on the band or your music.
Well, Spotify, obviously, although it would be preferable if people went to Bandcamp, which is what is it? atomicdrag.bandcamp.com. I am also on Instagram, which is Atomic Drag, Twitter, which is Atomic Drag 666, and you can find me on Facebook as well. I think that's everywhere you can find me.
Awesome. Is there anything you'd like to talk about or mention before we sign off that we haven't talked about already?
That was a weird noise. Not immediately coming to mind. I am absolutely terrible at doing anything that involves talking, which is bizarre because this is the third podcast I've done now in the space of a few months. For somebody that hates the sound of their own voice, it's really bizarre for me to find myself in the situation of doing this type of thing. But no, I would just like to thank anybody that's taken the time to listen, even just once, to check this stuff out. Anybody that's bought a t-shirt, anybody that's, bought anything digitally online, even listened to anything on Spotify, just giving it any attention whatsoever. All the DJs, Dottie at Paradise Cove and Hunter at Storm Surge Reverb, and all those guys, John Paul Black, that have given them plays, on their shows many times over. It's been great, and I'm very, very thankful to those people for taking the time to do that, because I just come out of nowhere there in July, and yet they were willing to give me time in their shows to play my music, and I'll always be eternally grateful for that. And yourself for having me on. It's the fact that people ask me to do this sort of thing is very strange to me. It's hard to get my head around at times.
I think it's very interesting to talk to the new bands, in particular, because the excitement is still fresh in their minds, and they're just starting out. Although most of them have been musicians at some point in their life. But it seems like the excitement and DJ Dottie and Storm Surge Reverb always love to jump on that because they always like to support the artists.
Well, I have to say, whenever I uploaded the first EP to Bandcamp, and I think within half an hour, Dottie was the first person to buy it. I found that mind blowing that there was like somebody that I didn't know personally had went out of their way to buy this thing that I put, out there. Apart from my friend that I, send stuff to for feedback, he went straight on and bought it straight away because he's very supportive. But I say after that, Dottie was the first person to find it out of nowhere and buy it, and to play one of the songs on the radio. and I say that was just mind blowing to me at the time. I couldn't believe it. Only been out for about an hour, and for her to do that and take the chance, and I see her doing it with loads of bands, and like
Yes.
she is such love for this type of music,
Yeah.
and Hunter as well. Like all of those guys. I mean, there's a guy out of wee town Tofino in Canada, Andre McGravy. Do you know that guy? Cooks It radio
No.
show. It's great. He does a couple of shows. He does one which is kind of a surf and garage stuff, and there's another one which like deals with more noise rock stuff, which are both great shows. But he's been really supportive as well. And as I say, these people just, did. It's just mind blowing to me that so many people have taken notice of it and played it. And as I say, very, very thankful to those people for doing so.
You should check out Shaking Cats Radio in Canada. They have a surf
Right.
show, and they love to hear new bands.
Oh, awesome! I've not heard of them yet.
Yeah, they're pretty well known in Canada. I in the United States, people recommended that I talk to them, and I interviewed them on the podcast, and they have such a love for surf music.
Yeah, well, let's check them out. To say they're a new one to me.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you so much, Lee, for lending me your time. I wish you the best of luck on your new EP, and maybe we hear some more this next year. Maybe you'll do a couple.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time. I know it's the middle of the day where you might have some things going on, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day then.
All right, Ryan. Thank you.